Hello, this is Dorothy Kuhn. I am delighted to welcome you back to the SuccessibleSHE podcast. I've got a fantastic guest, Terry Hickey, with me today. And Terry and I and his wife, Beth, we have all known one another for years and years. And I always think of him, he's not old enough to be my father, but I always think of him as my spiritual father because he is such a good man and what a great heart. You will love hearing from him today. And of course, as you know, I help women primarily overcome shocked response syndrome and transform from stewing, shouting, shrinking, and shunning people who don't respect you or appreciate you into women who can stand up, into the woman you can be who stands up for yourself with confidence, power, and love. And with me today, as I mentioned, is the wonderful Terry Hickey. He is a NLP, that's Neuro-Linguistic Programming, certified professional coach, and just a wonderful, wonderful soul. I have the utmost respect for him, and you will love hearing from Terry today. So Terry, how's life out west? You know, it's chilly here in North Texas.
Well, if you can imagine looking out like I'm doing right now, and I can see mountains on all sides, and I can see the clouds have drifted down to where they've drifted below the level of the mountains, and it's a magical time.
It is.
We're in the desert, and we just received this blessing of all this rain that's come down and made it possible for things to be even more alive in the desert.
Very nice, very nice. Rain is such a gift anywhere, especially in the desert. So wonderful. Well, you know, I was just thrilled to be able to reconnect with you when you were at an event here in Dallas a couple weeks back. So tell us a little bit about that event and the kind of work that you do. You know, some of the things that folks like you and I do are just, they're like magic.
It's interesting that one of the things, the event was called the Health Coach Certification Event from the Health Coach Institute, with two of my oldest friends, particularly one, Carrie Peters and Stacy Morgenstern. And they started out back in San Diego in 2010. And it has grown to, this time, there were over 1,000 people attending their event.
Wow.
And right now, the attendees are primarily health coaches.
Very good.
And one of the reasons I spoke about magic is because it was like magic. I was able to connect with people. I do a lot of work with coaches, so I saw a lot of my old friends, but I met new people. And what happened is that the event itself created an environment where transformation and magic was possible. And I remember saying at the end of the event, going up to a microphone and saying, "This event reminded me of the magic." And I paused for a moment and said, I took a line from one of the presenters I heard, "Magic, when implemented properly, is life-changing."
It is.
So the event brought together coaches from all over, not just the United States, but there were coaches from Europe, Australia, Canada, Latin America, and even some people from Southeast Asia. So it was quite a gathering.
Right.
And I think that they're foremost or at the forefront of really introducing the idea that health coaching, the idea of helping people realize their health goals, is going to be one of the important, I would call it an important aspect of how we approach dealing with health.
Yes.
And they are able to, health coaches and coaches in general are able to, rather than just giving advice, help you tap in to what motivates you, what's important, and helps you accomplish your goals.
Right.
Almost all the successful people I know do some sort of coaching.
Very good. I'm hearing some feedback. Are you hearing that?
No, I'm not. If I move this close, does that make a difference?
Let's see. Oh, it's the same.
Okay.
You want to unplug that thing and just see how it goes?
All right, let's try that.
Okay. How's that?
That's okay here. I didn't hear it before, so.
Yeah. I'm not hearing it now. So, technology.
Service.
Yeah. We have options. That's a good thing.
Options are always important.
Yeah. So I want to mention just a little bit what NLP is, because it's got that short acronym, because neuro-linguistic programming is a bit of a mouthful. And you correct me if I'm misstating this a bit, Terry, but for our listeners and viewers, I'd say about 30 plus years ago, in California, when there were many people graduating from really fine educational institutions in psychotherapy and other forms of professional counseling, such as we have today still in the US and around the world. One of the things that in that community of people who really were there to serve, like the troubles that a normal human life will produce, and to really help people get through those. And they noticed that even so, people would go to the same institutions, and even have the same professors and the same classes, that some of them got really great results and some of them not so much, and some of them hardly any positive results at all. And so the question really was, how, what's the difference between these people? They all got A's, they graduated, they know their material. What's the difference? And that's where NLP was born. It's born in those subtle ways in which people understand one another and speak and connect, heart to heart in a way that 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 opens the door, that really opens the door for that deeper change. You'd probably say that a little bit differently, Terry, but was I close enough?
Well, it certainly got its origins in California, University of California at Santa Cruz, where Richard Bandler and John Grender began talking about, they actually were looking at Gestalt therapy to start with, and they were wondering how it is that people change or not. Like you said, some people get results, some don't.
Yeah.
And they begin questioning, what is it that people who get outstanding results do? And they looked at Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, Milton Erickson. And what they discovered is that all of these people had something in common. They all had language patterns and ways of, and ideas and beliefs that shifted people.
Yeah.
So essentially NLP got its start doing what Robert Dilts, one of the NLP, I think, geniuses today, calls essentially modeling.
Yes.
And modeling is discovering what an expert does that makes them an expert.
That's right.
And so that study led to the model of NLP, which I think is more appropriately called a model of models.
Right.
People look at what works, teased it out, and applied it. And what they did is, that's different than psychology, is they studied people who got results.
Right.
So they didn't study, I'm sort of simplifying it, but they didn't study how people were broken.
Right.
They took people who had already created change in the world, in self-change, change in business, change in industry, and they discovered what those people did.
That's right. And those of you, dear listeners and viewers, who are in Europe and the Near East, and all around the world outside the US, if you go to a counselor, a marriage or family counselor, you are very, very likely to have someone who is trained in NLP. It's not so much the model within the US, which is a bit of an irony since it originated right here.
Um, what's really strange is that there's still argument about whether NLP works, is it a pseudoscience? What's really interesting about that argument is that it's really founded on very clear models like Noam Chomsky's linguistics model.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been influenced by people um, like I mentioned Chomsky, about other people who have really a solid scientific background.
Mm-hmm.
So I laugh because there are still people that are arguing whether it works or not, while other people are benefiting from it.
I tell you, it absolutely transformed my life. I was in a place that was I was crushed from years of what now we call gaslighting. I didn't even know that term back in the day. But I was in a marriage where neither of us was happy, and I was really doing everything I could to stay married because we had these two fine little children. And I had this goal in mind of being able to find a way to make a happy family. And along the way I just got more and more miserable. Everybody did. Not because I was trying to be that, but the tension in the house was palpable. And when I stumbled into, and when you finally say, please Lord, give me something here, I need something, however you say that in your view of spirituality or religion, then it's amazing how you will easily notice when it comes across your your radar, your field of view. And that happened within months.
What happened for me was that I was trained as a therapist. And as part of where I worked, had to keep up my education, continuing education units. And I always tried to pick something that was interesting. And I had heard about NLP, and I went to a conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I went into a demo from NLP where a man said that he was going to teach people the process of resolving phobias quickly.
Yes.
Now, a phobia, if some of you may already know that, but a phobia is a specific entity that people have a fear of. So it could be snakes, it could be heights, it could be insects.
Uh-huh.
And so he was talking about this and kind of looked out in the audience, and he started mentioning something about heights, and he looked out and there was 10% of the audience was already showing signs of their eyes were glazing over and their breathing had changed. So he said, would someone like to resolve this fear of heights? And a woman raised her hand, and he brought her up and proceeded to demonstrate with her in 15 minutes. Basically, he resolved her long-standing fear of heights.
Right.
And I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And it was a conference, and I happened to run into the woman the next day in the elevator, and I said to her, did that really work? And she chuckled and said, I'm on my way up to the swimming pool on the roof. I love swimming. When I first got here, I was so bummed out because I had a fear of heights.
Uh-huh.
The pool was on the roof and I couldn't go up there.
Yeah.
So I've been swimming. Immediately after I left the event, I went and put my bathing suit on to check it out. She said, it's fine. I can't tell you I love heights, but they don't bother me anymore.
Yay.
That's what he said.
Uh-huh.
I went to myself, Now, my training, it said that should have taken several months of psychotherapy.
Right.
So I went and found the guy. I ran across the guy who taught it, and I asked him, how can I learn this? And he gave me suggestions, and within 6 months, I was off training with the founder, Richard Bandler, and I did a months-long training with him. Probably since that time, I've probably put in probably 1,500 hours of direct training and 20,000 hours of study and practice. Hell, I've 30,000 hours of practices. And I consider myself to be a master.
Yes, and I consider you to be a master.
Well, thank you.
Definitely.
But I laugh and say, given all the time that I've put in, I should be.
Of
And
course.
I just feel like was exposed at the right time to the
Mm.
right model, the right technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that I believe it was, I can't remember for sure, it might have been Einstein, and I might be wrong in this quote, but basically said that any form of advanced technology looks like magic to somebody who doesn't understand the technology.
Exactly.
And so I would say that NLP is a set of interventions backed up by a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody once said to me, yeah, but it's got no heart. And I laughed and I said, any application of therapy without heart or any application of technology without heart is not effective.
You're right, because people don't get that you care.
So if you don't include your heart and your caring, your effects are less.
Mm-hmm. They are.
I mean, a doctor can learn all kinds of healing skills,
Mm-hmm.
but if he or she doesn't practice what has come to be called the bedside manner, they're not.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So any activity, if you bring your heart to it, you're likely to be effective. That doesn't mean that other activities aren't effective, but we know from research in physical therapy, in mental therapy, we know from Miller's research that one of the differences that makes a difference is the relationship that's created.
Yes.
And
Because it's trust. It's trust.
exactly.
Yeah.
One of the people who influenced me, I studied with a shaman in South America, in Peru, Don America. And one time, I was translating for him, and somebody said to him, Don America, are you a healer? He paused for a minute and he said, no, not really, not in the way you understand being a healer. He said, but you do all this incredible healing, which he does.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you misunderstand. He said, what I do is I remind people they know how to heal themselves.
Yes. Yes.
And then he further said later on that 3 things are required for healing. That you have to have an intent, that one or both people sets the intent, the healer and the person being healed.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a relationship. And the last thing you need is a ritual. And that ritual can be coaching, it can be therapy, it can be eagle feathers. And one of the things he used, river rock,
Mm-hmm.
can be a prescription. So we know that part of what gets people better is you engage their ability to heal, to grow, to be different.
Right.
And how one does that is what makes the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, I was about to take a segue into placebos and medical drugs, but I'm going to skip that for now in the interest of getting more to you.
No, let's visit it for 30 seconds.
Okay.
A placebo, Richard Bandler and Robert Dilts one time went to the FDA and they said that given that placebos were often as effective as drugs, they proposed marketing 2 kinds of placebos, a regular placebo and a high potency placebo. And they actually they had bottles of placebo pills.
Uh-huh.
And the FDA just got freaked out. And Richard Bandler said, well, we actually have an even better one. It's a red placebo. And they said, what do you mean it's better? They said, red is a healing color. The people that take red pills tend to heal faster than people who take white pills. And people who pay more for their pills tend to heal better than the ones who don't. So we ought to engage the placebo rather than fight it. We actually ought to learn how to engage it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's amazing how we don't necessarily appreciate how powerful belief is in each of our lives, and our beliefs organize the capabilities that we have, and within those capabilities live the skills that we show off, the actions, the words. And so if you don't have those kinds of the kinds of beliefs that will allow something to be true, you won't notice it, or it won't work in your life because you don't believe it can. It's
One way to think,
amazing.
you're absolutely correct, that beliefs trump, excuse that word in today's political climate. Let me think of a better choice.
Yes.
Beliefs rule.
Uh-huh.
And what I mean by that is that if you don't have a belief in place that supports change, change won't happen.
Yeah.
Now, there's an interesting thing then that if you go to change,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to change and upgrade your skills or upgrade your abilities, chances are you won't be able to do that without changing a belief or bumping up against an old belief.
Uh-huh. And that's where the connection with a wonderful coach makes all the difference, just to bring it back home.
Yeah.
So dear listeners and viewers, if you've got some trouble in your life and that you haven't been able to solve, a really great coach is wonderful, but skill is not all that is. You really need somebody that you can connect with. Am I right, Terry?
Oh, incredibly so. There's, one of my clients was telling me the other day that they said, I don't understand how you're able to create the change that you're able to create. And I said, well, actually, in some ways, it's easy. Here's
Mm-hmm.
why. Number one, you already came believing that I could help you.
Mm-hmm.
So the belief that change was possible was already there. You already believed, because you had some experiences earlier of having changed, you already believed that change was possible for you.
Mm-hmm.
Once somebody believes that, then very little needs to be done. The key is recognizing that change is about to happen
That's right.
and noticing where to apply
Uh-huh.
the touch.
Yes.
There's an old saying that little hinges swing big doors.
Yes, they do. And I
That's
know I had a client just recently who I could see that that he was untrusting. And he was untrusting not because he didn't trust me as a person, but because he is a PhD uh, in uh, in psychology, and so he's really uh, very clear about the supremacy of that intellectual pursuit. And I don't have anything against psychology. Every tool has its place. But he was, even so, he had all of that education. He was not able to resolve himself the troubles that were really uh, uh, difficult for him and making his life amazingly miserable. It was all self-generated. And, he's still doing that because he's really stuck in that model. Beliefs organize capabilities, and those
well,
organize behaviors and actions.
actually, his problem may exist at another level.
Mm.
If you think about what you described, I have a hunch that he will say to you something like, I am a psychologist. Would he say that, or would he say,
Well, no, he's
I do?
retired now, so he would say I was.
Okay. So if you think about that as an identity,
Mm-hmm.
any new values or behaviors that you introduce or that are introduced,
Uh-huh.
if they do not line up with the identity,
Exactly.
you're
They
going to have.
will not make it in. They'll come here and just like bounce off.
So the problem, you might actually have to solve the problem either at the level of identity, or my hunch is you might solve the problem at the highest level, which is mission or purpose,
Yeah.
why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So an intervention might go something like this. So why did you become a psychologist? And a story might be told about some belief about being able to help people or impact on people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so what's really important to you is to be able to impact positively on people's lives.
Right.
Yes. I guess that means that you would be willing to use those things that were most effective in helping the change, would you not? Generally, you're going to get an agreement.
Yeah.
And I'll say, because what's ultimately most important to you is to make an impact. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to be willing to model for others an openness to new ideas,
Mm-hmm.
because change will rarely happen employing old ideas.
Right. Oh, so true.
Even in that conversation, already the work is starting because we're introducing the interesting choice that we're linking up a high level, and I'm pointing to it for a reason, of
Mm-hmm.
mission or purpose,
Right.
why people do what they do. And then identity comes in, it's who they are that helps them to carry out that mission. And then just below that is the values and beliefs.
Right.
Now, when those are out of alignment, problems happen.
That is so true.
Part of the work that I think of is at what level does the problem exist?
Mm-hmm.
And if we think it can start, oftentimes, the way I was taught as a therapist was to intervene at the level of behaviors, which is actually that's not the most useful level.
Correct.
Unless the problem exists there.
Uh-huh.
Now, what I've learned lately is that there's a whole new way to approach habits, but I'm understanding habits more, that habits are actually in our neurology.
Yeah.
And we talk about habit patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So what habits are is that they're ingrained in the way we do things.
Right, right. And they're ingrained in your brain. Your neurons have reordered as you've learned how to do this thing better and better and better over time, so that those are the neural collections that fire the fastest, so you can just do it. You don't even have to think, like driving.
Right. So then but what's interesting about habit change is that good, effective habit change already involves taking a look at all those levels. Now, I'm marking out levels because there are 6 levels that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Dilts calls them logical levels of organization or alignment.
Yes.
The lowest is environment, then you have
Mm-hmm.
behaviors, then you have capabilities, then you chunk up to beliefs and values, identity, and mission, why
Mm-hmm.
people do what they do. So part of really good coaching or change work understands at what level people are stuck.
Yes.
If you miss that, you can do all kinds of things that have very little impact.
Yes.
When I was first learning this field, used to go to a lot of coaching events, and there were some coaches who would just say, just believe differently. No, if that was the case, we'd all be successful.
Well, even more profoundly, if that was the case, anybody else in the world could come along and say, just believe differently, believe this thing, and your whole life would be turned upside down. And then the next person would come along and tell you the same thing.
Well, that's actually why
identities for a reason.
Bingo. That's actually why beliefs are hard to change.
Exactly.
Because think about the way you organize your activities depend on your beliefs. That's the filter through which other things go.
Yes.
And if you changed your beliefs as often as you changed your underwear, life would be chaotic and crazy.
It would.
But just imagine that you go to sleep tonight believing that the world is a warm and caring and supportive environment, but you wake up tomorrow believing the world is unpredictable, dangerous, chaotic. You might not even want to get out of bed.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be too scared.
Exactly. So that's the key when people change major beliefs, or sometimes their beliefs are so something so chaotic happens
Mm-hmm.
that the belief structure is blown up temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see people looking lost. They'll kind of go, I don't know what to do.
It's like shell shock almost on their
We're
face.
talking about marriage. A lot of people come in with a belief that marriage is forever. Yeah, smile. And when one has that belief, it doesn't, until something happens that says, and I've heard this like this, I used to believe that marriage was forever until, and then there's a story about what happened
Mm-hmm.
that so came up against that belief that there was a shift.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
And
and I finally, in my own story, I knew that marriage wasn't forever, but I thought, this is my upbringing with a big work ethic, that if I worked at it enough, it would be possible. And so I worked on myself because that was what I had control over. And partway through an LP, I realized that you know there's only I can be the best Dorothy I can be, and if children's father wasn't okay with that, it was time to release him. That I had done my best.
so my guess is your beliefs shifted during your training.
Yes, sir, they did.
Yeah. So what we're understanding then is that in terms of, you think the people that I work with, I often start with the idea, I'll ask, what do you want? And what's interesting is that people will often tell me what they think they can get rather than what they really want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I really encourage people to dream big. You and I had a coach, Marsha Weeder, who's a dream coach.
Which is
And I
how we met.
That's right. And I still carry around a really message from her that is that if you do not dream and dream big, you won't achieve very much. And that the last place to look for proof that you can achieve your dreams is in your checkbook.
Exactly. That is the last place to look. That's a
But
constraint, not an opportunity.
once you know, if you're clear about your dream,
Mm-hmm.
then I think what coaching will often do is help you to ask different questions, like not, can I afford it, but to change it subtly and to go, well, what would you do that would let you know you could afford it?
Yes.
Meaning that I'm already presupposing you can do it. We're just discovering how.
Yes. Just discovering how.
And that in itself, those kind of questions begin the process.
Yes, they do.
So what I think of is that I think that people come in with some fixed ideas or beliefs, and that my questions are intended to find out, is that point of change already possible? Where's the intervention?
Mm-hmm.
Language patterns that challenge beliefs are an entry into the world of how a person structures their beliefs. I'm holding my hands like this because
Mm-hmm.
every belief has a structure.
It does.
If I can understand the structure, how it's put together, the A, B, and C of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that tweaking, I may know that the tweak can come here.
Uh-huh.
I was talking to a client just yesterday, and one of the things he's very talented, but he's in a job where truly his talents are not appreciated, and it has as much to do with the owners and things. And he said, I really struggle because I don't feel appreciated, and I don't think they appreciate me. And I just don't, and it was that kind of stuck. And one of the question I asked that made the most difference is I said, oh, the problem isn't that they don't appreciate you. The problem is that you're allowing them to see you in the wrong way.
Yes.
Actually, you are not appreciating yourself, and you're not standing up for what you're capable of.
Very
something
much
like
so.
that. And he went, and I could see
Uh-huh.
here, we were talking on the phone, I could hear the gears whirring. And he went, wow, you're right. I'm waiting for them to appreciate me. And the problem is that I'm not appreciating my abilities. And they're not appreciating me. Why should I work for somebody who doesn't appreciate me?
Exactly, exactly. And you know, this is just an example to me. You may have another take on it of how powerful environment is for us, for most of us, and how important it is to have a good environment, you know, on the one hand, and then on the other hand, to realize that you really do have a lot of sway over that environment, and your own environment inside your head and your heart and your person is something that you really do have a lot of control over. And that's a big part of what NLP really helps you be able to do when practiced properly.
There are there are people who will be listening to your podcast who are in soul sucking jobs, and they're there
Mm-hmm.
because they need, quote, need the money. But I have seen people who, when they become, when they when they say that I'm in a soul sucking job, and I go, what do you believe about your soul? And it's very interesting. And they'll say, oh, so what if you were in a soul enabling job? What
Mm-hmm.
would that look like? And it's like just shifting from soul sucking to soul enabling,
Uh-huh.
and or soul feeding. What if you had a job that fed your soul
Right.
instead of sucked it?
Uh-huh.
And I listen to people, and I'll say, just for a moment, allow yourself to be in that job fully right now.
Mm-hmm.
See what you see, hear what you hear. What's going on? Then say, okay, let that go. And now I know you don't yet have the job you want, but imagine having a job or a profession that fed your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And allow yourself to be in that environment that feeds your soul. What's that like? And already people get the contrast right away.
They do.
And I might challenge somebody and I say, well, given that you believe in the importance of your health, we know that's one of the goals. What will it mean that you keep yourself in an environment that's destroying your very essence?
Mm.
Can you afford that? And they go, but I'm afraid of leaving. And I said, oh, okay, then stay there until you die. What do you mean?
It might be soon.
and and I pay a lot of attention to linguistics, language, how
Mm-hmm.
somebody, their metaphors. And somebody goes, I once worked with somebody who was dying to take a vacation. So when they finally, their vacation come up, they actually had a serious heart attack and they were so sick they couldn't take it.
Oh.
And have a client, I love it. She gave me permission to say this. She said to me, I talked to her recently and she had a broken arm. And I said, what happened, Melissa? And she said, oh, she said, I broke my arm. And I said, what's going on? She laughed and she said, I remember telling my friend 2 days before I broke my arm that I was, that I needed a break from what I was doing. The universe had listened.
You know, the subconscious mind is always listening and it takes things literally.
So that's what
Mm-hmm.
I think we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the reason that I got involved in this field is that literally I was suffering what a lot of people in the helping professions call burnout.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially where we listen and we're exposed to suffering and pain and could do very little about it. And what I realized when I learned NLP is two things. I realized, number one, that I could create a structure for change,
Mm-hmm.
and that one, I had fun. It didn't cost me my essence, my being.
Yes.
And when I look back, I think if I hadn't learned NLP, I probably would be a diplomat today or something else. I would have given up the profession. It's like what I see with school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They come in so motivated to make a difference in kids' lives, and teaching has become structured in such a way that it sucks the soul out of everyone.
It's almost impossible to do.
Except for those
My
unique.
sister is a teacher. She was for 5 years. And she couldn't get the support of the administration, and honestly, she knew that their hands were tied.
Well, I think that it's an interesting thing that we're seeing the results. I'm going to go political just briefly. We're seeing the results of places that have cut taxes so much that they've cut education, they've cut healthcare to such an extent that other things have gone up, like depression and addiction and illness and things, and they're not realizing that. I think they often say we have to cut the fat. They cut the fat a long time ago. They've been cutting muscle for years now. And you can't hold the structure together if there's no muscle, no fabric that keeps it together.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the law of unintended consequences.
Right.
Often political problems are solved by what look like neat interventions, but the politicians have stopped thinking systemically.
Yes, and thinking
taxes here, consequence going to be there.
Go ahead.
It's the idea of you cut taxes here, what's the consequences there? Or my favorite one, pass more laws making crimes wrong, and now we have a criminal justice system that can't sustain itself. So business interests came along and said, why don't we privatize it? And then you have private entities going to legislatures, creating more laws that people can break to be in prison so they can make more money. I mean, nobody thought.
It's a downward spiral.
And so we're talking about applying this kind of systemic thinking. One of the coaching questions that's so important is what's called the ecology question, which is essentially, will getting what you want be a problem for you or anyone else?
Yes.
I want people to actually think through. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but I've seen instances where people have decided they're going to drop weight, and then they get attention from the opposite sex, and they don't know how to manage that attention.
Yeah.
And you realize that the original positive intent of putting on weight was to not have to manage unwanted attention.
Right.
Rather than getting the equivalent of learning in a polite way, say, fuck off.
Indeed. I had this very conversation on social media just yesterday.
Yeah. So it's the idea where somebody says, well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. And I say, so when did you decide you were responsible for someone's feelings? And that's where one of those early beliefs, if I have to satisfy people, functioning in your adult life. My favorite kind of intervention on that one is, oh, I understand. A childhood decision is now running your adult life. How's that working?
Like, how old were you when you made that decision? Oh, I was 4.
If I'm in good rapport, I can get away with that. If I'm not, somebody will think I'm a wise ass or critical or judgmental.
Indeed. And that's where that, when other people, kind of, so many of us, and this used to be me, it rarely is anymore. And when it happens, I know how to clean it up. But we don't want to like rock the boat or, come across, as women, we don't want to be called the B word and, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that we witnessed a really interesting thing in the impeachment hearings the other day where Dr. Fiona Hill was talking, and she nailed it spot on. And she talked about being irritated with somebody in the government. She said, I understand that we're working as a woman, that I'm working under kind of a double whammy, that women have been taught that if they are irritated or angry, it must be hormonal or emotional or things like that.
Well, men are taught that too. It's part of the culture.
What she said is essentially, in a good way, is that get over it.
Yeah.
That you've promoted, elected strong women, so get used to them speaking their mind.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
that's really your mission, is it not? To help women do that in a powerful way without making others wrong.
Uh-huh. Exactly, because when you set up that right, wrong, good, bad kind of dichotomy, there are no winners there. Both sides can talk smack about the other, and we're all in it together. So you know finding that way to be able to really stand up, stand in your power, and be able to move forward with honor and dignity for both sides. That was
Yeah.
transformative in my life. And, systematizing that made it easy to
No
teach people.
wonder you've made it as part of your mission.
Yeah. Yeah. It made a
You-
huge difference. I got out of the fundamental way that I got out of the miserable marriage. It was miserable for all of us, and we're all happier now.
That's so common where people are struggling at work or struggling in relationships.
Hmm.
And what you discover is that both people are. In the companies that I go into, that's not uncommon.
Right.
That it's pretty easy to discover that part of what's going on is that oftentimes the biggest disconnect of all is when companies state values or missions, and within 2 minutes you can see they're not honoring or living up to them.
Yeah, I call this the Enron system because here in Texas, years ago
And,
was
and
that
delay, right?
famous,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
company.
so anytime you have a company that purports to operate on missions and values and they don't, if they hired people for those missions and values, there's going to be a rapid disconnect.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, that kind of thinking that I use in individual coaching applies in systems also.
Hmm. It does. It does.
Yeah.
And
So go ahead.
now you go.
Well, I was just thinking about what I've been thinking about over the years is what's the best way, not the best, but a good way to impact on making change. And one of the things that I did was create a 2-day small group program where I work with people for 2 days. And it's less than 10 people. And during that time, I primarily do it with coaches, but not always.
Uh-huh.
We're doing three things. People are identifying their own outcomes that they want and
Hmm.
getting them. I'm describing what it is that I'm doing, the kind of interventions I'm doing. So there's an observer learning that goes on. And then finally, people get to have their own outcomes. So they're working on themselves, they're seeing how to work with others, and they're having a transformational experience.
Hmm.
And I do about 4 or 5 of them a year.
Wow.
And I've probably put a couple hundred people through because they're small groups.
Right.
And at the event that I was at, one of the people who's now Carrie, who's now making multi-million dollars, has a multi-million dollar coaching business with a partner.
Wow.
When I first started working with her, she was struggling to make 40,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that she did the work, but it was her clarity. And I was talking to her the other day, and she even describes kind of struggling with that original thing. And when she got clear about money issues, and money is one of those things that holds back a lot of people,
Right.
her life took off, and her whole life is different.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's the power when people set an intent, they're willing to do the work, they work with the right. One way to put it is coaching, when implemented properly, can create profound changes.
Very profound changes
Coaching
indeed.
is not advice,
It's Go
not
ahead.
telling people what to do. It's helping people discover what they're good at in another context and applying it, and helping people to think bigger than they have been thinking.
Yes.
And when people are willing to think really big, they create really powerful changes.
Yes, they do. And changes that like I find people are surprised with themselves in the best way.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to remind people of before I forgot is that you can find find out more about what I do at my website, Terry, Terry, and Hickey, you should be able to remember that, HICKEY.com. And I've been doing this now for, since 1971, I've been doing change work one way or another. And I am nearer, my future timeline is much shorter than my past timeline. So I've committed myself to working with people that want to make a change in the world. I don't care whether it's business, whatever. I have clients right now who run, I have one of my favorite clients runs a community mental health center. Another one is a public defender. I work.
That's somebody who needs some reframing and different perspectives, because that is honorable work and tough to do.
Yeah, yeah, and he's one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite clients.
Yeah. It's not just tough to do because the clients are hard, but because the system is hard. Back to our systems kind of situation.
And since we've been working, he's made really significant impacts on his system.
Wow.
And we even worked, Beth, my wife and I even did work with, we recently did a presentation, an all-day presentation for the Pima County Sheriff's Department. We were part of a day-long health fair where a good percentage of it was devoted to managing stress.
Ah, good.
And it was profound.
Ooh, we'll have to do another podcast on that, because managing stress is a really important, it's critical.
Well, think of it in this way, that stress is one of those things where you don't want to have a life that's stress-free, because if it's stress-free, you're either likely dead or in a coma.
Very much so. And it makes life boring. There are some stresses in life that are really kind of fun.
Gets to a level that it impacts on health and performance and other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about managing stress, because you're going to have stress. You cannot not have it. And your ability to manage it and optimize it is what makes you successful.
Exactly. Exactly. There are plenty of challenges in life. It's how you look at them that make all the difference for the opportunity they present.
So already that's a reframe.
Yes.
Einstein said you cannot solve a problem with the same order of thinking that got you into the problem.
And he's right.
You must apply a different order of thinking.
Well, this has just been fantastic. I'm going to put your website in the show notes. So you all look for that. It's Terry Hickey, Terry, Hickey, like HICKEY.com. And I got that right?
Yes, and there's a couple of just free things I have. One, I produced a report one time, an audio report, Words That Heal, Words That Harm.
Oh.
It's the idea of understanding the impact of words. Words are magic, use them in the right way.
They are. They definitely are. And your words have been magical today. It's one of the things I always love about catching up with Terry. And Beth is magic in her own way. We will have her on in the new year.
Well, I love it. And then let us know sometime we can revisit about stress.
Okay, that sounds great.
We're actually managing and reducing stress.
Yes. And okay. That was like a number one amazing thing for me, and so I really recommend it. So I'll let you all know when that show is coming up.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, and may you take these words and do something with them.
Amen. Bye for now, y'all.